Hello, and welcome to the Profitable Mindset Podcast with Charlotte Smith, episode number 1.
Welcome to the Profitable Mindset, a show dedicated to teaching you the skills you need to build a profitable product-based business that makes you feel free and fully in control. Here's your host, Charlotte Smith.
Hey there, I'm Charlotte Smith, and welcome, you guys. I am thrilled to be here for my very first podcast episode of the Profitable Mindset. This is really exciting. I've been wanting to do this for a couple years, and I've had many of you encouraging me in that time. And well, finally, here we are. And I'm really especially excited for these first few episodes. This is going to be really helpful for farmers. I heard some very disturbing USDA statistics a few years ago that really stuck with me and really prompted the content that I'm going to share with you over the next few episodes. They're going to be part of a series called The 25 Steps to Start and Set Up Your Farm Business. And those statistics that disturbed me and continue to disturb me, and I want to help fight against, are that I heard 300 farmers go out of business every week in America. And 80% of farmers are out of business by year 2, and only 2% of farmers are still around at year 5. So these first few years are really crucial to get you up and running and doing things right so you can build that sustainable and profitable farm that will make you want to be able to hang around and serve your community for the long run. And I've got some things that I'm going to share with you that will help you do that. These things I will go over today, the 25 steps, are things that I struggled with for years setting up my business. So I started my business 10 years ago. I started my farm, and it took me a long time to figure out these things. I wish someone had just had a checklist and handed it to me. So that is exactly what I've created for you. So before we dive into where I'm going to explain the first few steps, I want you to be sure to grab the whole checklist so you can follow along. So go to 3cowmarketing.com/25 steps and grab the complete checklist of the 25 steps. And then I'm going into more detail here. They're also included in the show notes as well. All right, let's get started with step number 1, where you will decide on your signature product. Now, you probably already know which products you'd like to sell, but this is an extremely important piece of advice. I want you to start with one product, especially if you're brand new. Now, if you've already dove in and you got all kinds of products going, I want you to start thinking about which one is your signature product, okay? This is one animal species like pork or beef or chickens, egg chickens or meat chickens or dairy or flowers or vegetables, all right? I want you to get really good at producing and selling that one thing at a price that includes a 35% profit margin. And I want you to have more demand than you have product, especially if you're just starting out, before you add another product or another species. This is because one of the top reasons farmers go out of business is that, I see this all the time, they start with a species such as chickens. Let's say you're going to do meat chickens because everyone knows chickens are the gateway drug to farming. So you start out with meat chickens and you get through your first season and you didn't really sell enough at the price you needed to make much of a profit. So you decide you're going to add pigs, and you think that you will, increase the sales because the people wanting chickens will also buy pork. So at the end of your season with pigs and chickens, you realize you've lost a little bit more money or your profit margin is even smaller. So you decide to add vegetables so you can draw more people in that will then buy your pork and chicken too. All right. Well, this really doesn't work out at all. And it's a quick trip to going out of business. I see this all the time. All right. Now, a diversified farm is possible and it is a great goal, but you must create that diversity slowly over the years to remain sustainable. You can't start out with a diversified farm and expect to be profitable. There are so many barriers that stand in the way, the expenses, of course, but then learning to care for each species or each different product in the way it requires. There's a learning curve there. You context switch a lot when you go from one species to the next and trying to care for them. But most importantly is that if you are not good at selling out and creating a huge demand for the first product at the price you need to make your 35 to even 50% profit margin, then adding a second species or a second product will just be worse. All right. You've got to be really good at creating demand at the price you need for the first project or product you sell. Only then can you add another product. All right. I see this is such a huge problem with farmers. There are so many great models out there of diversified farms that are successful. But remember, what they look like now is not where they started, and you can't start there either. So start with one product, decide what that signature product is going to be, and get really good at selling that, creating demand for it. Make sure it's a 35 to 50% profit margin, and then add your next product. And I'm spending a lot of time on this one because it is one of the number one reasons I see farmers go out of business. They just get in too deep too quickly. On our farm, my signature product when I started the farm 10 years ago was raw milk. And we were known for that. And it wasn't until we were a couple years in and I had my pricing exactly where I wanted it to be. I had a wait list for milk that we finally added chicken eggs. And then a year later, we added pastured poultry. All right. So that's what I want for you. Create that signature product. That's what you're going to be known for. And if, like I said at the beginning, if you've already got a whole bunch of products, I have farmers that are selling 15 or 20 different items or even more on their website. It's okay to totally backpedal a little bit, pivot a little bit, decide what your signature product going forward is going to be, and put all your focus on that. It dilutes your marketing the more products you have too. So this will help with your marketing when you start out as well. All right, so decide on that signature product and let's move on to step 2. This second step is another one that is really important and I see a lot of people skip, and that is I want you to estimate your costs starting out. This means what I want you to do is create a basic budget, including some of the startup costs that you're going to write down and just guess you might have. Some of these are one-time investments, like we had to build a milking stanchion, and you might have to build other barns. You might have to build fencing, buying water troughs and tools. Of course, those things will have to be maintained. Some of them will have to be replaced, but then you'll have ongoing operational expenses. You will have feed. You will have the purchase of your animals. You will have your rent on the land or maybe your mortgage on the land. Electric bills are a big one, insurance. So think of all those costs. And this is going to require some research on your part. What I did is I spent a whole year researching my farm before I ever brought home my first cow. And a big part of that was I would call up other farmers in my area and just ask them if I could come visit them. And I would take them cookies. I wasn't raising farm products at that point, but I'd take them a gift of something. And I just asked them if I could come spend time looking at, maybe a little farm tour or something. I was really naive at that point, so I didn't realize how time is so valuable to farmers, or I would have offered to pay them. Nobody asked me for money. They were so generous. And I asked them things like, if you could set up your farms differently today, or if you could start over, what are some things you'd do different? I learned all kinds of things. So that research you do up front before you ever start your farm is really important, and it will help you with figuring out these expenses too. Also, look online, do some research online and figure out what your expenses might be. All right. And then I have one more thing. I'm going to link up to this in the show notes. At 3cowmarketing.com/price for profit. I have a free course there, and included in it is a calculator I've got in a spreadsheet where I have my example from my farm in there, and there's a blank worksheet in there. So you can put your own costs in there, and it will get you started thinking about all the things you're going to need to budget for in setting up your farm. As many of you have probably figured out already, farming is an expensive business endeavor. And so you don't want to underestimate those costs. I also want to say it is actually really easy to underestimate the costs. Most people do. Kind of reminds me of, we built our house almost 15 years ago. And we had a budget. We had so much money we wanted to put into it. And we needed to be moved in 8 months because I was pregnant with my third child. And by the time, as time went on, it ended up at the end costing twice as much money and taking twice as long for us to get into the house. So when my girlfriend was building a house a little while after that, I told her, well, you might want to budget about double what you thought, and it'll probably end up taking twice as much time. And it was pretty funny because she said, oh, no way. We are on a tight budget and we're really good about watching the budget, and we have to get in a certain amount of time. So that just won't happen. And then a couple years later, she's like, you know what, Charlotte, you were right. It took twice as much money and twice as long for us to get in our house. And I talked to so many farmers who've been in business for a while that say the same thing. It's going to cost way more money than you probably expect. So fill out a basic budget for yourself, but also go through my worksheets, and that will help you think of a whole bunch of things that you hadn't even thought up yet. And this will just help you be more prepared going into it. All right, so now let's move on to step 3. And this one is to know the law. What I mean by that is know the laws around your product and around how you're going to sell in your county or in your city even. So laws vary around the country, and it is your responsibility to be familiar with them and know them. What happens is I see a lot of farmers jumping online, for instance, on Facebook, and they'll ask other farmers the laws on a certain topic. And they're not getting accurate information because this farmer lives somewhere else. So you'll only really know the law that fits your situation. And ignorance of the law is not an excuse when they show up on your doorstep and have a cease and desist because you've done something wrong that you didn't know about. It's not an excuse. So you really need to research the law. What I suggest, or the place I suggest you start, is your Department of Ag in your state. Now, I say start there because they may send you to your city, they may send you to your county, but you need to research all of it. And also, the other thing is when you're sent around to these various departments, often you will get different answers from different people. I've found, especially with farming and setting up farm businesses, that the so-called experts don't always know the law, or maybe they're each interpreting it differently. So what's been really helpful to me is to write down the first and last name of the person I talk to, what their title is, and where they are. Are they with the city? Which department are they in? Are they with the county? Because I've gotten different answers from coworkers even. So if you have that proof that you talked to this person on this date, and this is what they told you, that will help. Now, of course, if it's still against the law, it's against the law. But some things are just kind of a gray area with what you're doing. So whether you're processing animals on your farm or trying to sell them out of a farm store on your property or selling raw milk, whatever that might be, really spend time researching the law. Like I said, ignorance of the law is not an excuse if they show up with a cease and desist. And that is a bummer to have that happen. Lots of farmers that happens to, and I don't want it to happen to you. All right, now we're going to move on to step 4, the last step in this first podcast episode. And this is name your business. Now, sometimes the name is really obvious to you, such as McKay Orchards or Julie Smith Farms, or perhaps you want to be more creative than that. but brainstorm all the possible names. I see a lot of farms who have been even farming for a year or two or more without a name. So it's really important for branding that you do come up with a name. And I like this idea. When I brainstorm, what I will do is I will take massive action. I will try to write down 100 possible names before I ever go back over my list and start crossing things out. The whole idea of brainstorming is you just get on this creative roll and you don't discount anything. You don't discard anything until the end, because one really bad name is probably the one that's going to lead you to the really good name. And I've named a lot of things over the years, like, you'll come up with naming your business, of course, but then you're going to have product names. Or for me, I sell courses. So I have course names. I had to name my book. I had to name the podcast. So that's just what works for me as brainstorming. But now let's get into some other ideas around naming your farm. I want you to be careful using names that might be too specific. There's pros and cons for being specific. For instance, if you call yourself Callie's Corriente Cattle, then if you want to expand to a new breed down the road, it can be really limiting to you. Not to mention that Corriente is really hard to spell for most people. So it might hold people back from finding you. And then another name would be something like Paul's Poultry. Paul decides to start a poultry farm. Well, that might limit him if he wants to start selling other things down the road. However, on the other side of this, there's also merit in being that specific. If you are really certain from the get-go that you will not be boxed in with that particular name, then by all means, being that specific can be really, really helpful for branding. Because if someone wants poultry, they're going to call Paul's Poultry. They're going to Google it, and that's what's going to come up. So there can be pros and cons for both. Also, if you're considering selling your business down the road, you may want to avoid using your own personal name. Although I do think it's great for branding to use your name. So give it some thought. And especially today with social media, we're often known as our name on our websites and in our marketing. So there can be a lot of merit to having your name attached to that. Now, when I first started my farm, of course, I have a personal example of this. I was only selling raw milk. So I named my farm Shampooey Creamery. And I had this reputation. I was known for raw milk and known that is what we did. That was my signature product. But then we branched out and we started selling pork and beef down the road. But actually, it was okay. I was a little worried, like, oh no, should I change the name? But nobody cared because I already had the brand built up. And they were like, oh, you have pork and beef available too? Great. We love it. We want it. And we had no problem selling those products too. So that just gives you an example of the progression that might happen down the road. All right. So there you go. All my tips and ideas on how to name your business. All right. So that wraps it up for the first 4 steps of the 25 steps to start and set up your farm business. Listen to the next few episodes. You guys, this is going to save you years of time and it's going to get you profitable much sooner. I know this. I have this in one of my classes and it has helped farmers get set up very quickly for profitability and sustainability. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now, what I would love to ask you to do, because my podcast is new, I'm asking all of you to write a review on iTunes for me. And special bonus, if you do write a review these first few weeks, you'll be entered into a weekly raffle for a free consultation reviewing either your website or your social media account, where I'll give you feedback during our time together on things you can improve upon to increase sales and followers. If you want to enter, just go to www.3cowmarketing.com/iTunes. Now that page will take you through the whole process of leaving a review on iTunes, which is easy. It just takes a few steps. Then it's going to ask you on that page for a little bit of information so I can identify which review you wrote. Then you'll be entered into the weekly raffle and you have a chance to work with me for free. And I'm telling you, there's nothing more fun than that. All right. So point your browser there. And I will talk to some of you soon. I'll let you know by email if you are the winner of that raffle. All right. Now, lastly, just be sure to download the 25 steps, 3calmarketing.com/25 steps. All this information is in the show notes for this episode as well. And I will talk with you next week, where I will be back with episode 2, where we continue describing what you need to do for the 25 steps to set up and start your farm business.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. For more great resources, check out theprofitablемindset.com. See you next time.